Yo, what's going on, guys? We got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust today. Today, we're going to be talking about the one and only Rocket Raccoon and Groot, the first ever combo 2-character card we have in Marvel Snap. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So, Rocket and Groot is a 3-cost, 3-power card that reads, you can move this once. After your opponent plays a card here, steal 1 power from it. As you guys can see here on screen, we're going to be showcasing what it looks like in-game as well. There are a couple theories I have on the card as well. I do believe that this is going to be able to steal power more than one time. I believe the move function is the only thing that is going to be limited to once per game. And then we do have a couple key synergies I want to keep in mind for this card as well. I think first and foremost, you think of Silver Surfer. It's a 3-cost card. I think it fits in kind of the Nocturne slot that used to be in that Surfer list. Of course, Surfer now is very techy in that sort of situation to see what kind of cards you want to have in the list. Of course, this does not change the location like Nocturne did, but it can get some pretty good power, just like how Nocturne was at a 3-5 herself. I'm also thinking Hope Summers. You can play this onto a Hope Summers and then move it off of Hope Summers. I like just movement cards on Hope Summers as it is to be able to make it sure it does not take up the entire board space there, and you have the option to change. And then I was thinking Jean Grey. You know, with Jean Grey, your opponents are forced to play cards on a Jean Grey lane. You can have Rocket and Groot there so that they have to get that power stolen from them pretty much because they have to play a Jean Grey. There is still a lot of War Machine going on at the moment, but I think this is a focal card for that. And with that in mind, let's think of some of these key counters. I think there's so many cards right now that just get countered by Shadow King. Shadow King is so relevant in the meta, so it just makes a lot of sense for Shadow King to be one of those cards that just counters whatever you got going on with Rocket and Groot. Of course, Luke Cage, make it so the steal does not work as well for your opponent, or for you, not for your opponents, in the sense you're stealing power, kind of like, you know, Silver Sable or like Cassandra Nova. Luke Cage kind of warrants that, so you're not getting as big as a transaction from that. But of course, you still will get the power in Rocket and Groot. And then if they're on lane by themselves, right, Guardian just hits Rocket and Groot, and your Rocket and Groot has to be stationary and no longer can steal, you know, power from your opponents. So another just key focal card you're seeing a lot right now too. But let's go ahead and jump into the good and the bad for this card. Starting off with the good. So first and foremost, when we have the good of this card, it is easy to play on curve. It's a 3-cost card. You can just play it on curve, just let it be there, see what happens. But of course, you have to, if you want to maximize it, you kind of have to, you know, target where you think your opponent's going to play next. So you have that unpredictable movement, which is also really solid for you. Your opponents don't know, are they going to move it now after they just stole power from me? Are they going to keep it where it is? What exactly is about to happen here? And then it can steal multiple times in theory. I haven't seen it in game just yet, but the way the text reads, the period, I believe, ends the function of it can only move once. So we're thinking that it actually can steal power multiple times. And then it is a great plugin for Surfer. I mean, Surfer getting another card, you know, just seems like it's just right. And then get to the bad over here. Your opponents do have to play cards onto your Rocket and Groot location, so that is something you're just going to have to keep in mind there. In order to maximize the value and actually get power to the card itself, opponents have to play onto it. It's a targeted card to counter. They can just play it not on that lane with the Rocket and Groot, which is why I think it's really solid that it does have the movement. So in case your opponents do start playing off of that lane, so keeping that in mind. And then it is still a very competitive slot, even though it does fit well in Surfer. It doesn't mean it is the best fit for Surfer because the 3-cost slot is so competitive as it is. And then it is limited to 1 move, which can also be, you know, offsetting, because then your opponent, if you move it and your opponent sees you move it, then they'll play onto there. Then they just play off your Rocket and Groot lane the entire game, so they don't have to worry about losing the power. So just keeping that in mind. But let's go ahead and talk about the potential floor and ceiling for this card. Starting off with the ceiling, of course, I had kind of just a summarize here, like a kind of synopsis, is this can steal more than one time. If this does work this way as well, it could be a 3-5 or more power just on this card alone. If it steals twice, it's a 3-5. If it steals 3 times, it potentially be a 3-6. If you look at it transactionally and the affliction, you're also afflicting another card with -1. So if this is a 3-5, then it's a 3-7 technically because it took 2 power from your opponent. If it goes off again, it's technically a 3-9. So the value could be actually numerous for this card. This is just one example there. I think the floor would be you play this late, you maybe don't have priority, it's just a 3-3 on the board, which isn't bad. It's definitely not the premium stat line for a 3-cost card, so you're wanting to play it beforehand. But getting 3 power on the board with no downside at the end of the game isn't the worst case scenario. But I think on average, you probably could get 1 steal, making this a 3-4 from a 3-3, and then a 3-5 if they don't have the Luke Cage or they don't have the Shadow King to reset their cards that got stolen power. So it'd be a 3-5 in that transaction. But let's go ahead and move into the decks we made for Rocket and Groot as well. So the first one I have is New Age Surfer. It is a pretty much classic Surfer list that we had from the beginning of the season. It's New Age in the sense that we just plugged in Rocket and Groot, so it's kind of just a plug and chug kind of list here with Surfer. This is similar to what I used to hit Infinite this season, but instead we're using Gwenpool in this iteration in order to get some extra power across the board, whether it's for the Broods, for the Shawls, and you have Galactus still. It's kind of just a run-of-the-mill Surfer list. Your only really tech counters are going to be your Killmonger and your Copycat. And then moving on over to our next list we have good old Locked In. So we're kind of using Jean Grey in the sense to lock in where our opponents are going to play, being able to set up some Goliath. You have your own War Machine to be able to play out of your Jean Grey lane. You also have Madame Web you can use to move some cards around. Whether you've moved your Rocket and Groot already one time, if you move it into the Madame Web lane, you can then move it out of the Madame Web lane into another location to get that proc again. You can move cards off of your Jean Grey potentially, or move your Jean Grey into another lane to make it so your opponents have to play it there. You have Nebula set up so your opponents can't play onto the Nebula lane. You have Jeff to be able to play off of the Jean Grey lane itself. A couple of different options, as well as Hope Summers in order to be able to sling out more power towards the end of the game. So that's why we have that list going on over here. We have the Ebony Maw. But I think this could be pretty interesting. And then our next list is going to be a bit of Copium. I'm letting you guys know in advance. It is Guardians Copium. We're using, the Guardians. We have Professor X. We have Gamora. We have Arrow. We still have the Rocket and Groot. We have Magneto. We do have Ramp with Hope Summers. We have Daredevil to see what are we going to be playing on turn 5 here, whether it is going to be a Prof, Gamora, or an Arrow. Of course, Professor X can get movement cards in his lane now, so keeping that in mind prospectively. You also have Juggernaut to be able to potentially steal some lanes for you. We don't have any, no War Machine in this list. You could add War Machine if you wanted to as well, but I was wanting to see maybe we could have a little fun, just a fun list with some Guardians. Let me know down below what do you guys think you're going to be plugging your Rocket and Groot in. These are just some starter lists, of course. I wanted to make some just a little bit different, but let's go ahead and talk about these spotlights this week. We actually have a very interesting spotlight this week. So we have Blob, we have Selene. Blob hasn't been in spotlights in a minute, but Blob's also kind of fallen out of the meta, I would say, a little bit. Maybe he's back in now with the change to Arishem, but he's still nothing crazy. Selene is still just bad. I don't know why this is still a Series 4 card. It just absolutely does not make sense for me. I bet she drops in Series drops whenever we get that in the new year. But we have 2 Series 5 cards with Rocket and Groot, Blob, and then a Series 4 card with Selene. So the Spotlight Week is interesting on if you want to spend your resources. Thinking about it like logistically, if you're wanting a new card for Arishem, you're playing Blob, maybe you can still play him in Thanos. I'm seeing just not that much Blob in Thanos. Selene, I'm not seeing this card used at all, so I'm not a huge fan on that. So the strength and flexibility is mainly just for Rocket and Groot and Blob right here. You probably could make the argument for them both to be 1-star for just how bad this Spotlight Week is for Blob and Selene. Rocket and Groot, I think, is going to be a good card. But flexible-wise, I think Rocket and Groot's flexible. Blob, not really flexible. Selene, not flexible. So Rocket and Groot kind of keep that up. The variants, not a huge fan of them. Maybe the Selene you like because, the Selene looks nice, but like her overall, I wouldn't really go for it. I wouldn't go for the Blob. The Blob's not that great. The Rocket and Groot look cool. I like Marvel Rivals. It's a solid, kind of variant there, but still not a huge fan of that. And now moving on over to the community ratings for the cards right here. I think this is very accurate. I think that this card is going to be flexible. I think strength-wise, it has potential to be a solid card. I think it has opportunity there. I don't think it really gets readjusted. I don't think it's that demeaning in that sense. And I think the community is right in this situation. So I'm kind of combining this slide and the next slide together, but I'll go even more in detail in the next one. But this is what I've seen a lot of other people talk about when it comes to this card. It's flexible. It's playable. There's not really demeaning or overpowered. We don't think it's going to get adjusted, which I totally think that is fair. I think it's pretty much the exact same. It's the exact same rating I have. I do think the flexibility is there. It's a 3 cost. You can kind of plug into anything. Maybe you play it in an Affliction deck. Maybe you play it in a Surfer list. Maybe you just play it in a good cards list or a move list. I think it really could be played in a bunch of different slots. It doesn't really have to be in one specific archetype. I think it's just going to be pretty solid overall. Nothing crazy. Maybe it is the card of the season. Who knows? I think Doom 2099 is shaping up to be the card of the season, even though it is the most boring card of the season, the way it's impacted the meta. And looking at it that way, Doom 2099 has that value there. So I think overall, when it comes to my rating on this card's a snap. I think this card is totally worth it. I think the spotlights this week are still weird. I'm not a huge fan of Blob right now. Not a huge fan of Celine at the moment. But I do think this is a good card opposed to last week where Bruce Banner, you guys have seen, is just a bad card, which was a total bust. So I would buy this card. If you have the tokens, I would buy it. If you have the keys, only really spend keys if you have 4, I would say, because you just never know if you're going to hit or miss with this current system we have going on. But with that in mind, I'm going to say these final notes we have right here, wait a few days. I could be wrong about Rocket and Groot. I could be right about Rocket and Groot. Who knows? I would just wait a couple days, spend your resources sparingly, because January and February has an amazing lineup of cards, so definitely be on the lookout for those. We should also be getting news about the cards coming out in March within the next couple weeks as well, so trying to use that to plan accordingly. But especially, just take a look at what's coming out before you truly decide to spend your resources. Like I said, I could be wrong, we could be right. Give it a couple days, and then, yeah, sometimes maybe Rocket and Groot only acts one time. Maybe you don't get the 2 procs that I'm talking about here. Maybe you only get to that 1 interaction, so you only can get it to a 3-4 or a 3-5 if you count the affliction as well. So just keep that in mind. Wait a couple days, and then, yeah, just make sure you guys play what you want to play. The objective of this game is to have fun. Good cards get nerfed. Bad cards get buffed. Sometimes it takes forever. But I want to say thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you guys stuck around to the very end, definitely feel free to like, comment down below what your thoughts are about Rocket and Groot. Until the next time, you guys have a good one. Win the rest of the weekend. God bless, and Tucker out.